So with the 10th year Riot Games anniversary stream, they actually introduced preseason changes, and I wanted to go over it. So the first thing that they talk about is the elemental dragons. And so what they're basically doing is once you get 4 dragons killed, you will get a dragon soul. And then not only are you going to get a buff from it, but it also means that the entire map is going to change based on whatever dominant dragon you have. So with Infernal Dragon, they said it's going to create a rift, and it's going to break apart parts of the wall. So if you look here, suddenly the red buff area has 3 open areas. That is very interesting in the fact that normally you would never stand in this area when protecting this brush, but now suddenly you have access to here and here. It also means it makes collapses a lot more interesting from blue side when facing red side, because now when you flank, you have this huge open area. This wasn't the case before. You had to walk all the way around. Like, it was just like this little corridor. Now it's actually way more open. We look at Ocean Drake. This one is going to give you brushes. A lot more. Notice there's brushes by the dragon. First off, the easiest thing to do when approaching dragon for vision is you just have a pink ward in the pit. Now suddenly you might have to have one here. Maybe you need one here. Just the way you approach vision is going to be different. And it also means there's going to be more ambush opportunities because there's more areas to hide. So now where you place vision is going to matter so much more. And keeping track of where your opponent is, specifically when you push the waves and kind of waiting to see someone show, like those fundamentals are going to have to be even better for teams. Like, you can't really slack off as much with this introduction of brushes like this. And then here's another picture. You look at red buff, huge change here. And you think of facing an opponent when they have a Baron power play, you know, one of the first things you do is, okay, can we catch anyone approaching for vision, anyone in mid rotation? This can offer more opportunities in that regard. Very different. Cloud Drake. So Cloud Drake is going to give you wind tunnels, and as you can guess, if you can move faster on the map, that means you can rotate quicker. That means you can get into fights quicker, and suddenly just like the average time that you have in your head before, on like how long someone's going to get to point A to point B, that's different. So this one here doesn't really matter as much. Like, it's in the pit. What matters is the one here, because if you're the opponent with kind of like mid control, side control, your side laner, if he wants to group, he's going to get there much faster now. And here's another example. So like, it's around the red buff area. Mountain. So Mountain's actually going to change parts of the map, kind of similar to like the Infernal, but I think it's more focused on like major objectives. So we have Dragon, which suddenly has not an full open area. It has 2 side parts open. So first off, the first thing you're going to think is, okay, I can suddenly now stack members out here that are ranged and DPS safely, while these guys would have to go around these corners. That is a little scary. 2, again, you're going to need 2 pink wards now. Suddenly one for outside and one inside to have full coverage. So the vision changes up just kind of like how the Ocean Dragon changes vision for Dragon. And we go here, again, it's around the red buff area. I can't tell if this looks like there's something new here. But honestly, I can't tell if that's just a part of the Raptors camp or not. But here, specifically, again, when you're rounding this corner, and you're trying to funnel the team, now there's 2 little areas that you can play around. It's not, I don't think it's, this one's a little bit different than the Infernal Drake, because the Infernal Drake makes this area more open, whereas this makes it more clustered. So, but typically you don't funnel a team this deep here. This is better for teams of mounting defense when they're trying to push in, having this now as like a new blockade. So I feel like this is better for just the defending team than the offensive team, whereas the Infernal change is better for the offensive team versus the defensive team. Okay, so what their actual changes for like the stats wise, Infernal's the same, right? Infernal's the same. Ocean, it says missing health, not mana. So if you're not getting mana anymore, the priority of taking an early Ocean, an early Ocean won't be as impactful for a lot of the laners, but it still counts as a dragon towards your dragon soul, which you need 4. And the dragon souls are actually can completely change how a composition can play. So that will still, help, right? Like the dragon soul will still make Ocean a priority. It just won't be as strong as current live Ocean. Cloud, you get rid of the movement speed, but now you get ultimate cooldown reduction. That, I have no idea how that's going to play out, because having your ult come back up sooner will both allow you to have, force plays more, whether it be for skirmishes, team fights, whatever. But it also might mean that you can get away with not going into CDR as much with certain champions. So we'll see about that. Mountain, gain a percentage increase of armor and magic resistance. So this really depends how much the percentage is, because I'm going to assume 1 mountain is not going to be very impactful at all, because if you have like 50 armor and it's 5%, that's not a lot. That's 5 armor. No, it's 2.5, right? 2.5 armor, 2.5 MR. That's nothing. Now, if it was base armor and base magic resistance, I think mountain would be pretty nuts. But for it being a percentage, it's probably not till around you get to 2 mountains and you get into mid game that would start being an actual benefit towards the team. So right now, like if I were to rate these, it'd probably be Infernal still at the top, Cloud, Mountain, Ocean. That's how I'd rate these right now. Now, when we look at the souls, and again, this comes from when you have like your most dominant dragon you take, the majority dragon you took, that will be your soul if you get 4. And only 1 team can get a soul, right? Like whoever gets it first, they have it for the rest of the game. Other team can never get it again. So Infernal, every 3 seconds, your spell or your auto attack will do an AoE explosion. Now, what does this do for you? Okay, if you're a team fight team and you funnel them into a choke, everyone can proc a small AoE blast on their opponent, which can stack up to probably like 500 damage easily with everyone hitting them. That's pretty nuts. Champions who don't have wave clear built into their kit. Okay, suddenly I can actually push out the wave a little bit faster. Perhaps a champion who normally couldn't split push now can in the game. Well, that's completely different to what it was before. We have poking champions. Poking champions suddenly have a little extra burst, kind of like having a comet. So now you have more poke damage for siege. You could have better team fight. You could possibly have a new split pusher. Now, I will say, while having this as like kind of like a pseudo wave clear, it probably doesn't matter as much for controlling mid wave clear. Because if you have 4 dragons, you probably had control of the waves for the most part already. Now, Ocean Dragon. This one is interesting because while I don't think Ocean Dragon is actually that good for stacking wise, this buff is pretty damn good. Any damage triggers strong health and resource regeneration for 3 seconds and then it's less for minions. In other words, again, this is an extremely good tool against poke because you can be in combat when this procs. So if you're getting poked down, but you're trading like a little bit poke back, oh well, great. I'm regenning. Oh, we're gonna go to the wave. We got poked. We go to the wave. Oh, great. We healed a little bit. You get into a big team fight. Well, we suddenly have a little bit extra sustain, which means that Morello's executioners are extremely important. Even if even let's say none of the champions had really any like big healing, you would have to go executioners and Morello's if someone got this, most likely. Cloud Dragon. Hitting enemies with abilities or attacks lower the cooldown of your base abilities. This one is basically a built-in Shojin. Probably not as insane, but it's a built-in Shojin for every champion. This might be the strongest one out of all of them. Because first off, it definitely impacts your ability to split push with certain champions. 100%, that's just a guarantee, right? Like, we suddenly have... And also, keep in mind, I'm going to say right now, they're removing Shojin. So, if you get this with particular champions, and they're building other items besides... Because there's no longer Shojin, they're building an extra item that's probably, like, bigger DPS increase. You have this, yeah, they can probably take over the game with this alone. And this is also very impactful for support players, because support players, they hit a couple of abilities, hit a couple auto attacks, and suddenly they have another CC ready for the team. So I honestly, like, there's just so much to think about when it comes to Cloud that I would probably rate it as number 1 right now. And then you have Mountain, where it's after not taking 5 seconds of damage, gain a shield until it's destroyed. And it's, again, probably going to be a fat shield, because it says it stacks with bonus attack damage, ability power, and bonus health. And that means that bruisers would have a ton of benefit from this. And any AP users that go like Rylai's and Leandries also get very big benefits from this. Now, how impactful do I think this one is compared to the other 3? I think it's the worst of the 3. Depending on how much the shield is, because if you're playing around Baron, let's say, and you have to do a turn, right? Bait and turn. Whoever's tanking the Baron, first off, that shield is gone. And any of the members that are also attacking Baron, that shield's going to get chipped away as well. Now, if you're forcing the fight before doing Baron or something like that, and you come in with like a 200, 300 HP shield on every single member, that is impactful. That can be very impactful. Especially if, let's say, you picked up one Ocean Dragon, or like, let's say one Ocean Dragon. So you have a little bit of regen out of combat, and then you build this shield back up, and then you just go right back in again. That is interesting. But once the shield is gone, that's it. There's no sustaining bonus from it during a long fight, like Infernal, like Ocean, like Cloud Drake. For that reason, I would find the uses of Mountain to be less, but it might scale the best of the three. Because again, if you're just doing eventually Death Ball, run at them, ARAM type combat, having that big shield in the beginning where you might have a lot of burst and everyone does a ton of damage, that might overwrite Infernal, Ocean, and Cloud altogether. So I think late game wise, Mountain is probably one of the better ones, but in terms of like mid game, not so much. Put it into order which ones I think are best. Probably put It depends on how much the heal is for Ocean Dragon. Clown Drake would have the most versatility of the four. I'd probably put Cloud into maybe in Ocean, Infernal, Mountain, in that order. Because again, having extra abilities being able to go off is a big deal. But there are certain champions, I will admit, that won't benefit from this as much. Like, you can think of a Rumble. A Rumble will not benefit as much with a Cloud Dragon Soul. Because you don't want to ramp up your heat meter so quickly by spamming spells. Whereas, a champion like, let's say, like Renekton, that's a big difference. A champion like Vayne, big difference. A champion like even Kaisa, like this benefits certain champions way more than others. Whereas these two hold more consistency. But I think no matter what, you're gonna have champions that can be pretty overpowered with this compared to these. So I'd probably put Cloud, Ocean, Infernal, Mountain. I think this also just has a lot more benefit and forces different itemization by their opponents compared to this, which just adds a bunch of extra damage that doesn't really force your opponents to itemize differently. It's just they just have more damage. Like, if you can't go more defensive just because they got Infernal Dragon Soul. Like, you still have to stack damage, whereas this can actually change your opponent's itemization. Elder Dragon. So Elder Dragon will give you a execution at a certain percentage with the burn, which is honestly quite ridiculous because before, you got enhanced stats from the dragons you had, and you had the burn. Now you have the burn, but no more enhanced stats. You have an execution. The execution matters more because you're just trying to finish the fight anyways, and your opponent has to be very mindful of this execution compared to before. You still might be able to live with a little bit of HP. Maybe the dragons they got were like 3 ocean dragons, right? Like, oh, they got 3 ocean dragons. So sure, their burn is high, but the ocean dragons don't matter in the fight. Whereas now it's like, well, I mean, we might have had 3 ocean dragons, but we also have the execution. This also helps the teams that don't have dragon stacks, right? They don't have the dragon soul, because they themselves can get the execution. Maybe their Elder burn, it won't be as good, but who cares? The execution matters the most. So it's a good change. It makes Elder not feel so dire for the team that didn't stack dragons. And if they steal it, they actually could really turn the fight around compared to, the team was still with all the stats, like being perfectly fine. Okay, this one is really interesting because they're going to change the side lanes, both top and bottom, adding an alcove. I can't speak right now. Alcove. Now, what makes this particularly interesting is that this is going to allow certain picks to be able to kite around this area here. Like, think of a Kennen. A Kennen is going to be able to run back while their melee champion approaches them, walk around here, and if they can't get on top of him, you have to forfeit. Like, you would have to play around this constantly, and most likely if he wards this, you just get auto-attacked to death. Think of Anar. Anar has an actual jump to get over this. He has a wall in several different angles, 360-degree angle, all around to play around with his ulti. Think of a Rumble. He can run and retreat into this area and use Equalizer to burn. And suddenly he has a choke to play around, whereas before, it was just a big open lane. There are so many things in this one change that can enhance currently good champions. But champions that have struggled for a while now, like Nasus, Darius, Garen, this only hurts them more. Because now you have to try to run at your opponent who's now going to be kiting you around this area. You don't have a dash, and you don't have great ways to stick onto your opponent. Granted, yes, Darius does have, like the pull. Nasus does have like the slow. But that is not enough. That is not enough to make them ever better in this situation. So I'm curious how this will transform how teams approach top lane. Because with this added benefit of being able to funnel your opponent into an actual choke in lane, it's going to make approaching 2v1s different. Much different. He will most likely be able to buy more time in that gank situation than before. Now, I don't know how this is going to affect jungle ganks necessarily, because the jungler can pretty much hide here, and in all cases, you would have to sweep or pink this anyways if you wanted to do a lane gank, because the second you move out of this brush, they would see you if you have a ward here, right? And that'd be the same case even in current live patch. So I don't know how this would change doing lane ganks necessarily, but it does improve your ability to do teleports. Now, the chances of doing a teleport top lane doesn't happen often, and usually it's pretty reactionary. So that won't really be much of an issue here. But in bot lane, that's different, right? So in bot lane, we had 2 side brushes. Just 2, not 3. That already gives you more cover and more fog of war to play around as a support. Now, it also adds a problem with dealing with TP flanks, because guess what? Bot lane is the most prone to getting teleported on. And in the current patch right now, with 2 side brushes, you pink one of the 2 brushes. You can sweep the other, whatever. But you have only 2 areas to worry about. Then you have the area that's behind the turret on the side of the wall, your tri-brush, and then there's the river brush. Like those are just like basically the main areas that you have to worry about. And of course your wave, but you can't do anything about your wave for the teleport. But right here, first off, there's an extra brush that you have to have cleared. Okay. There is a little, like, what would I say, crevice or whatever here that you would have to clear out. If you put a pink here, your opponent can put a ward straight in the corner. There is way more places to get a flank ward down to use your teleport advantage. So what that means is that most likely more supports are going to have to grab sweeper to ensure that these kind of wards are not possible. And we see that a bit on live already, right? Like in pro play, you see supports going sweeper a bit earlier. This will probably have to be more mainstream with this change. Now, the next thing is, how does this impact duo lane? And for duo lane specifically, we have to think about range supports, because range supports suddenly have a new place to run around and harass their opponents and bait them in while your ADC DPS is whoever walks in. Now, the biggest champion I can think of that actually benefits from this is Zyra, because Zyra has plants. And if you walk into Zyra, she will place her plants, and then she can run around while her plants DPS. She benefits a lot from this situation. Also, like champions like Rumble, like champions like Nico, Zyra's ultimate is a big AoE circle, and so happens if you funnel into her, this is even better. And finally, the other thing that's helping range supports a bit in this situation is, before, supports only had this amount of movement, because usually the ADC hovers the left side, right? The upper side of the lane, whereas the ADC hovers and works, or the support hovers and works for side brush control. Well, you only had this space to play around. Not much to go for. Now you suddenly have this space and this space. There's so much more areas for you to dodge and avoid skill shots by all-in champs like Blitzcrank, Thresh. Nautilus gets affected the most by this because, of course, his hook can't go through the wall. So Nautilus actually gets a decent nerf from this being in the game. Who else? Braum. Braum doesn't have a way to actually get on top of you unless he W's to his ADC or he has flash. So even if he hits you with a Q here, you still have to get pulled in, and this guy can still kite you out a bit. Now, champions who really like this are like Rakan and Pyke, because Rakan and Pyke get around this wall piece very quickly. And Rakan and Pyke also have the mobility to go right over it to engage, while also having the ability to quickly retreat from it. So these two big roaming supports that are meta, I think just benefit more from this kind of placement. Now, I'm not 100% sure how this will help. I don't think this is going to help all range supports, though, just to keep that in mind, because while you do have more space to dodge, if you pull yourself further in without any DPS like a Janna, they cut you off and you're stuck. So it's not going to help every range support in the game, but certain ones are going to really like this. Also, keep in mind, if you run a thing like Xayah Zyra, and you want to retreat into here when your opponent ganks versus, trying to run straight back to your lane, instead you want to pull into here, again, you have the funnel strategy. Pull them in, use your ults, feathers are in front, Zyra plants are in front. It will make gank choices and really assessing how much damage they have to be different. Now, what else do we have? Oh, right. They're adding a little side brush to the blue buff entrance. And I'm actually not sure how impactful this is going to be. So, on one hand, if you're for instance, your blue side here, right? And your opponent has Baron control, you technically can snack in here when they try to approach it and kill them, right? Set up an ambush. But I feel like this is like a pretty easy brush to check overall, because you have someone from range who can do it. Most likely you have someone with a ranged skill shot to actually face check it with that spell. And you can do it from here and from here. And most likely you would have swept this area for any wards, and if they didn't place any wards there, then they're just going to blindly guess when you approach. So I actually don't think this is that big of a deal. But maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I think the best thing I can think of is looking for someone that's trying to approach from pushing a wave and then rotating over. And then also, I guess TP flanks. I guess that'd be the other one, right? Because again, you can't just put a pink ward here. You gotta put pink ward inside the brush. So that, I guess that would be the other change. Now, looking at jungle pathing, this one, they made it so they're reducing Krug's XP and increasing Gromp's XP. And the whole point of it is so you can do a buff, a camp, and then one of these outer camps like Krug's or Gromp, and you will hit level 3. And that's great, right? Like, what we commonly would see is, like, you might see junglers do blue-red Krugs, or red Krugs, Raptors, like full red clear to hit level 3. Or like one camp from blue side into top, or full blue into red for level 3. Now you could do full blue and look for something bot. You could do Let's see. Actually, you couldn't tech. I was gonna say you could probably do wolves, raptors, red, but of course that wouldn't work, right? Because you need Gromp or Krugs, and Gromp spawns a little bit later, anyways. So you will have a few other options, which is very nice. How impactful it will be, I'm not actually sure yet, because they do state here we're slightly decreasing jungle XP. So while you'll have more options on your first pathing, you will gain less XP overall, which is not ideal. And if Krugs doesn't give as much XP and it's still as tanky, perhaps you see junglers move away from that camp because it'll just be consuming so much time. So we'll have to watch out for that one as well. And then, yeah, so this part here, again, solo laners are going to get more XP. The number one issue with this is if solo laners are getting more XP, then that means mid lane is going to become absolutely ridiculous lane. Mid lane is already the best lane to have like your best player, right? Because it's in the center. You know, you can approach Dragon, you can approach Herald, you can approach bot lane, you can approach top lane, you can approach the enemy's Raptors camps, and moving jungle and mid together to make plays when they're stronger is just always way more impactful than, you know, your top laner being a bit ahead. It's much better. And so with more XP, with more levels in your mid compared to anything else, investing in him matters so much more. So I hope it's not going to be as awful in that case, but at the same time, you know, it does open the opportunity for teams who find ways to rotate members to mid to assist their weaker mid laner. That strategy becomes more viable. So that can be a good thing as well. And, you know, reducing the amount of bonus XP generated when allies share XP, so bot lane's a bit slower, that only benefits supports versus ADCs. ADCs, for the most part, are just waiting for items, big item buys, so they can actually impact the game. Supports with less XP, while it kind of hurts, is not the end-all be-all situation for them. Because they can always rotate out, especially if you can get priority in bot, and rotate him out. Now your ADC is going to get more XP, right? And your support's going to be able to impact the map more because he's going to be out of the lane. He's actually going to be trying to affect top, mid, and top. So this actually might... Well, I think it hurts bot lane, especially bot laners who want to sit in lane only. It could also be almost a little buff to bot lane in a sense that if the meta is more on having supports just run around the map and having your ADC get solo XP, maybe they might be a bit stronger than they usually are. So I will have to watch out for that one. Oh yeah, also, this part, respawning Rift Herald earlier in the game and allowing her to respawn once if she's killed early. That is very interesting because I don't know how early Rift Herald will spawn now, because right now it's 10 minutes, right? Maybe it's at the 8-minute mark. Maybe it's a 7-minute mark. Who knows? But this makes having a strong top side of the map more important. Giving up the first dragon most likely is not going to be a big issue, because Ocean Dragon doesn't matter as much. Mountain doesn't really matter that much. It's only Infernal and Cloud that are the two biggest impacting early game dragons. So with that being said, you would rather have Herald very early on and then be able to cycle the Herald again to get another push for plates. So you could get 2 Herald plate plays while the enemy gets 1 dragon, and that sounds really good. And if we're taking into account to the alcove change in top lane and in bot lane, but specifically for top lane, champions like Rumble, who fight very well in a 2v2 because of his ultimate, And then because of the alcove change, which is allowing him to funnel his opponents into that area and keeping him more safe. And it also has the harpoons to kite around the new obstruction, like wall piece. Priorities could change quite a bit. Move on to support items. At this point, they're getting rid of the charge system or buying new support items. And what's interesting about that is this right here. They don't have to spend 1,500 gold to complete it. So you can actually invest in other items. Now, you're not going to have the same... You're not going to have, like, the nice early stats of the support item. But if you get to invest in other items, this may change how much damage support can actually bring into a fight. Because again, we think about Zyra, she really doesn't want to invest in Spell Thief. Let's be honest, like, she really does not want to upgrade any of this. Now suddenly she's putting focus on getting Magic Pen or Liandry's or Rylai's, like a really early Rylai's. And that in itself can be very impacting for early mid-game fights. We look at enchanters who buff their ADCs. Okay, now suddenly I can get to buy the items that my Ardent Sensor, Redemption, whatever, sooner. Because I don't have to invest in this. So with this change, before I mentioned, okay, maybe support roamers who let their ADC get more XP could be more beneficial. If you're roaming, guess what? This dude is getting is most likely getting his stacks, his support stacks more, so he can get these items to get his wards sooner, get his free stats sooner, and possibly may even be able to get his bigger items done sooner because he's gained those procs, whereas, the roamer actually has to get something done, so it's like risk versus reward again, right? And I like that. That's a really good change. It's a lot better than the current iteration. Where, you can still buy the increased stats from the support item and then kind of quickly make up for it because the support item gives you more gold to accumulate quicker towards your Sightstone, right? Like, you get a Tarion's, you get the proc sooner, and you get an extra proc, so you can actually hit your Sightstone sooner. You get Frostfang, yeah, more gold. Okay, great. I can hit my Sightstone sooner. Like, that's the concept. Like Coin as well. That's not the case. Like, you have to actually get these procs. Oh, so Coin's removed. Let's keep that in mind. Coin's removed. So it's either you auto-attack champions for towers for Spell Thief, or you actually take CS. It's one of the two, which are almost all beneficial towards someone who stays in lane. So, again, risk versus reward on how you want to play that out. Yeah, they added a poaching rule as well. This is purely just for, again, avoiding funnel comps, right? And funnel comps are pretty awful, so that's good. Lethality. This is a little interesting in that adding more lethality items, specifically one like this, enable split pushing. Its unique passive grants a huge attack speed buff when no allies are nearby. This is purely for split push, right? And that's what most lethality users want to do, right? You can think of Jace, you can think of Zed, you can think of... Kiana doesn't really necessarily want to split push, so it's not as beneficial to her. But any champions that like this, you could say GP. Like, this would be very good on GP, right? This both will help those lethality users and help the people who might grab the split pushers or soul laners who might grab just one of these, one lethality item, and slot it into their build. And if they can split push, wow, they are... This is much better than Ghost Blade, Dust Blade. also, Edge of Night is going to be basically Banshee's passive, so it's always up. That is huge. You don't have to time it, it's just there. And so, perhaps, if you don't feel like you want to split push, you feel like your team has to team fight, but you want that, again, you still want that lethality item. Edge of Night is the perfect thing to get. And then they're going to add a couple of others, which we'll see about. But, we combine this with solo laners getting more XP early, and seeing how lethality items spike very, very well in the early to mid game. We could see assassins come back. We could see champions again who might go 1 or 2 lethality items, and they might come back into the game just because of this. So that would be intriguing. And then other items, they're removing Spear Shojin. Great. That's because they're adding the Cloud Dragon Soul. So if you want Shojin effect, you need to have majority dragons and a soul. It also means that champions like Renekton, Jax, though Jax didn't get his till second item, right? But like specifically Renekton, he's not going to have a ridiculous spike on that item, which is good. He should not be such a monster because of just one item. I think that was... Yeah, okay. There's nothing else on other items. And then finally, Keystones-wise, they're going to reduce the Conqueror's ability to fight tanks. Okay, that's not bad. Now, keep in mind as well, though, while you don't have Conqueror for fighting tanks in top lane, you also don't really have... Like, tanks really don't benefit, for the most part, with the changes with the alcoves. They can get kited pretty easily. Like, think of Maokai. Like, does Maokai benefit from this at all? No, not at all. Ornn sort of benefits from it because, again, yeah, okay, so there's gonna be a little bit less true damage onto Ornn, but Ornn also can use walls pretty well, right? Because of his E. So Ornn has a specific advantage to that. Same with Poppy, right? Like, Poppy has the more angles for her E. Okay. But other tanks, not so much. Like, Sion gets a direct counter to the alcove, and the Conqueror change wouldn't really matter. Now, what they are doing to it is we're going to put more... So we're putting more power into the stacking of the adaptive force. That's interesting. More AD onto your champion means, let's say you're putting like Camille or Aurelia into a ranged top. Okay, well, I'm 100% going Conqueror because you want to be able to stick onto them in the first place anyways, right? And now you're going to get additional AD, like a lot more AD most likely, because I mean, if you're getting rid of the true damage, you need to have some extra benefit to it, right? It could also mean more benefit for junglers, specifically like Rek'Sai. Maybe you don't feel like you need to go Hail Blades because you gain so much bonus adaptive. Same with Xin Zhao. So it could replace Hail Blades in a way, which would also be kind of unfortunate because Hail Blades is a bit niche of a ruin in the keystone in the first place. Klepto. So I think it's pulling the power of the farm gold and pushing more into early game elixir drops. So it sounds like they're basically trying to get rid of the bags of gold. Like, that will be happening less often, and you'll be gaining elixirs. The only thing to say about this is, if the elixirs drop more often and they sell it at a decent price, you won't make as much, and you definitely will have the back to sell them. But it's still gonna be a little bit the same, right? And if we think about this in the later stages, if you're getting a lot of elixirs, right, a lot of like passive bonuses all of a sudden, maybe it actually makes Klepto a bit better of a ruin. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Is like, maybe it actually makes Klepto just better. And then we look at Aftershock, and it's they're trying to get rid of the tankiness of it, right? Like the MR and the armor that you get from it. That's fine. Aftershock gives way too much, and it's given too much for so long that and I don't know why they never changed it. But they're also giving it power to tank your champion. So I'm curious what they want to do with this, because it most likely means something about like, okay, if like X health, like you'll do more damage based on X health that you have or something like that, right? And it in a way could make, some of the top laner tanks who can't really proc grasp in a fight, right? Like, so, like Ornn versus Kennen, like you're not going to go grasp because you're rarely going to hit him. You'd usually go spellbook because you just get the free summoner at that point, right? Like you just want to have more summoners without doing something that would be useless as a keystone. But if Aftershock, for instance, gives you a lot of more power in your initial trade, because you're just gonna do one trade on them anyways, maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's worth it just going Aftershock even with the reduced resistances. And that's it. That's all they have to show for it. So there's a ton here, right? Like I talked over each part, things that can happen, things that I expect to happen. But overall, I think it's really good that they're making such big changes for once and showing all the details to us right away. And it doesn't seem like these changes are ridiculous, right? Jungle changes are not extremely different from previous seasons. When they introduced 2-minute scuttle grabs, that adversely affected jungle pathing early game. Like you just had to fight for scuttle crabs. This one, it's just okay. We're making Gromp allow you to hit level 3 with 3 camps. Great. Okay, I have a additional option laid out to me now. The laners are basically going to get the most changes. How is top lane and bot lane going to play out differently now that they have both reduced XP in bot lane when you share XP, both with how range picks and all-in picks play around this new terrain. Dragons are way more important now. You hit Dragon Soul, it's a huge buff, and even though I don't think like Mountain is like that insane as a soul, it still gives you an extra advantage that's probably better than just having, we do a bit more damage to towers objectives, right? Like this is just actually I shouldn't say that necessarily, because dealing like 20% extra damage to objectives so you can actually burn Baron faster is a pretty big deal. So this is just a different take on it, I guess I would say. But like these ones have way more direct impact to the game, especially with what these two ones are for their passive bonuses. Infernal and Cloud Drakes are gonna remain as the top 2 dragons. And then, again, Elder Dragon change. That will... The one thing about Elder Dragon change that actually will probably be more impactful than just what it actually brings as a buff is that it doesn't proc till you get 4 dragons, right? It does not proc till you get 4 dragons, and you might be able to just delay and just never take the 4th dragon, so it just never becomes an objective on the map. So a team ahead who maybe didn't get dragons early on just leaves it open, right? They just prevent you from taking it ever, and then you just never have to deal with it again. So that's an interesting take. Increased XP with soul laners being a bit stronger with levels, and the idea of a support helping one of these 2 laners get even further ahead. Maybe perhaps one of the soul laners might be able to carry really hard. That'd be one of the first things you would think of, is like maybe mid lane's just gonna completely take over the map, and if you can't stop it, then you're just doomed. And then, support changes. That's a completely different. I mean, that's a completely different thing, right? Like we talked about it, is the approach that teams can take with a good support, and knowing when to roam, and knowing when, like, oh, can we just sit in lane, like that will change how teams play completely as well. So overall, good changes, and it's really exciting to see what happens.